Good morning and welcome to Great Tre Zen Women's Temple. And this morning we have a special treat. The Reverend Tre Genjo Williams will be doing our Dharma talk. But first, we will have the opening sutra.
An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
Now, a brief statement on dana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity, or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectations when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tre do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. And Genjo, I guess dana would come to you through Great Tre.
Yeah, please offer it to Great Tre.
Great Tre Temples.org. And I think there's a place to make a note at the bottom for where it's to go. And now a brief introduction of our speaker. Reverend Tre Genjo Williams is an engaged Buddhist who has been practicing meditation and other mind-body practices such as aikido and yoga since 2011. He received Boshisattva precepts from Reverend Teijo Munnich in 2020, at which time he received the Dharma name Genjo, which means to actualize the way and to show up, be present. In November of 2023, he received priest ordination from Reverend Munnich at Great Tre Zen Temple. And now we will listen to our great Genjo.
Thanks, Lorna. And thanks everyone for being here this morning. So Teijo asked me to talk a little bit about the robes that we receive when we ordain and the sewing process. So that's what I'm going to do my best to do. And this is in preparation for, in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a sewing retreat here for those who are taking the precepts or ordaining. And so next week, my sewing instructor, Caroline Young, whose Dharma name is Savannah Amatayasa, and she's the spiritual director of Anatasati Magga, which is a Zen center in West Asheville. She's doing the talk next week, and so I'm just the opening act to kind of get everyone ready. So if you're interested in the sewing practice and learning more about the robes and the tradition, please come to the talk next week, because she's really excellent and she's super knowledgeable, and has a great practice in Zen, but also in Tibetan practices, especially including around death and dying. And she runs the Center of End of Life Transitions and is a I don't know if she would use these words, but death midwife, and helps people during that transition, and runs a green burial site in Fairview. It's really incredible, and it's a great opportunity to learn from her. So yeah, please come next week. Yeah, big shout out and just gratitude to Savannah for offering to give her time. She's the spiritual director of a spot, so you can imagine she's very busy, and without her, wouldn't have been able to sew this okesa, which is this outer layer that we wear and that we sew ourselves in preparation to ordain. And so I'll share a little bit about the history and a little bit about my practice and understanding of it. I ordained like a month and a half ago, and so still figuring it all out. I just learned how to put these robes on, and I'm just walking in them day by day and kind of figuring out as I go along. For the history, I want to also extend gratitude to Tomoe-san. Tomoe-san is the wife of Katagiri Roshi. And so Katagiri Roshi is Teijo's teacher, and it's the lineage we practice here at Great Tree primarily. And so Tomoe-san, she received transmission of sewing the robes in this traditional way. It's called Nyohoe in Japanese. That was passed down from Shakyamuni Buddha. So about 2,700 years ago, it's been passed down in this very precise way. And that tradition has been kept through these ages and generations through Bodhidharma, who they say brought Zen to China from India, and then through Dogen Zenji into Japan. And now Tomoe-san received transmission from Eshun Yoshida Roshi, who received it through Eko Hashimoto Roshi, who was one of Katagiri Roshi's teachers when he was at Eiheiji. And so Tomoe-san received this in 1971. And so pretty recently has this been transmitted here to the West, at least in this lineage. So to me, it's a really special and exciting time to be here in this time and space practicing. So yeah, big shout out to Tomoe-san. You can find a PDF version of the book that she put together, chronicling this history and tradition, and there are hand-drawn diagrams, and it's all laid out really beautifully and precisely. You can find it online. If you search Nyohoe, Tomoe-san, or go to Minnesota Zen Meditation Center under resources and then sewing. And if you do look for that book, please consider extending dana to them, which it'll go to Tomoe-san. Yeah, so I pulled a lot from what I'll speak about from her instructions, the Nyohoe, that she wrote down. And then from a fascicle of the Shobo Genzo by Dogen Zenji on the spiritual merits of the Keisa Kudoku. So I also encourage you, if this is of interest to you, to read that, the Keisa Kudoku. You can also find it online. And it's Dogen. If you've ever read Dogen Zenji, it's beautiful and poetic and precise. And there's some great stories in there about the merits of the Okesa. One that I'll share that really stood out to me is a disciple of the Buddha, of Shakyamuni Buddha. Utpalavarna was her name. And I wrote down, that's Pali for she who has the hue of a lotus blossom. And so she, in the story, and this is laid out in the Keisa Kudoku by Dogen Zenji, she became enlightened during the time of the Buddha, wore the robes, and she's going to teach, and she goes to this noble's home, and she's teaching to the women there, and she's basically like, please ordain, like, join me, sisters, come ordain, it's a great practice, come get free. And the people she's teaching to they're like, no, we can't, like, we're really young and youthful and like really desirable and attractive, and there's no way we could uphold the precepts. And this teacher is like, well, that's okay, then don't uphold them, just take them and break them. And they're like, but we can't take them because then we'll break them and then we'll go to the hell realm. And she's like, well, if you go to the hell realm, just go to the hell realm. And they're like, well, no, because then we'll be suffering. And she's like, okay, let me break it down. And she basically is talking about her experience, and she's achieved these deep insights into herself and into the Dharma. And so she's seen in the story, she's seen her past lives and karma. And she's like, okay, so 3 lifetimes ago, I was a sex worker. And in order to entice more customers to come, I like kind of jokingly and scantily like wore the Buddha's robes. you know, to like kind of as an attraction thing. And then she's like, because of that, because I just jokingly wore them, in the next lifetime, I became a nun and like practiced sincerely and realized the way. And this was in the time of Kassapa Buddha, who's the Buddha before Shakyamuni Buddha. And then in the present day in this story is the time of Shakyamuni Buddha. And she's like, and now I'm enlightened, you know? And so basically she's saying like, we can't know what engaging with this practice will bring, but just do it. And then the Garjuna is there and he's like affirming all this. He's like, oh, yeah, and she gained the 3 insights and the 6 transcendent abilities. And like, he's just like kind of hyping her up is how I experienced it in the story. And I was reflecting on that, and that's very much been my experience with it, not receiving or not experiencing the 3 insights or the 3 or the 6 transcendental abilities or becoming an arhat, being enlightened. You know, that's not my experience. Very much here in the world of desire, you know, trust me. But that experience of I can't take the precepts because there's no way I can uphold them. I'll break them immediately. And then yeah, I'll be in the hell realm or whatever, this state of being. And of course that was all true. You know, I took the precepts and I've taken them several times now and immediately break them. You know, Teijo tells some great stories about this. And there's some people who say it's impossible actually to break them. But anyway, Uchiyama, Shohaku Okumura Roshi's teacher, Uchiyama Roshi too, says, you know, when Okumura Roshi tells the story of like when he received the precepts, Uchiyama Roshi was like, great. And like, now you're going to uphold them, right? You're desiring to uphold them. And everyone's like, yeah. And he's like, well, you just broke them, you know, because now you're attaching to this desire, attaching to this. It was like the gotcha moment. But anyway, that's been my experience of like, oh, I can't take them because I'll break them. Okay, I take them, I break them. Okay, oh my gosh, look at my life, you know, and there's this suffering happening and like I'm being really hard on myself. Because what I realize is it points me to ways that I'm not embracing and benefiting all beings and ways that I am creating disharmony in myself and in the world, in my communities. And it's hard to see that, right? It's hard to wake up to those things and to continue to wake up every time I sit, you know, and go throughout my day. And in Sangha, it happens. But then it's an opportunity to like, take care of life more fully, I've found. And so that like cycle of like taking and breaking and going to hell and back, I've found to be very beneficial. So anyway, a little bit of history about the Okesa. And so the story goes, and this is in the Nyohoe that Tomoe-san wrote. And she in a more complete way too. So really go check it out if you're interested. But the story goes that back in the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, a disciple of his, he was King Bimbisara. He was the king of Magadha. And so the Buddha was hanging out at this resort in Magadha, which I like that image. The Buddha is at the resort. And maybe he was teaching, maybe he was chilling, maybe both. But King Bimbisara, who was a student of the Buddha, saw some religious folks and kind of assumed they were Buddhists. And so he was on his elephant because he's a king, and he gets down off his elephant because he wants to pay respect and connect with his, you know, fellow practitioners. And he gets down and he realizes like, oh, these aren't actually Buddhists. These are, I think, Brahmins or Brahmas. And so he's like, oh, you know, gets back on the elephant. So some discrimination happening there. That's not the point of the story for me. But he goes to the Buddha and is like, okay, look, this thing happened. And so I'm going to request that you design robes that distinguish us from other, you know, followers of other traditions. And so the Buddha is like, okay, cool, I can do that. and he talks to Ananda, and they're walking. He and Ananda are walking, one of his disciples, and they come across this field where they're growing rice, and they're really struck. The Buddha's really struck by the harmony he sees in this field, and how there's no discrimination there, and all beings are there peacefully. And so he tasked Ananda with creating a robe that simulates and embodies that harmony, that non-discrimination. And so one type of Buddha robe is called a rakusu. And it's kind of it's a small okesa. Tomoe-san, it's not considered really a nyohoe. Nyohoe is kind of this traditional form that follows the tradition as it's been passed down. And there are three kind of criteria that need to be met: the size, the color, and the fabric that's used. And so this rakusu, it has the color and the fabric, but the size is different. It's small. And so I guess my understanding is that during the Meiji Restoration in Japan, which is like 1860s, there was a lot of simplification happening. And so the okesa, the 5-row okesa, got simplified into the smaller 5-row rakusu. But it's the same. It's the same kind of, I don't know if you can see, but these kind of rows. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about the okesa and the story there. And there's all different requirements of what is considered a nyohoe, in this traditional style. Nyo means things as they are, so suchness, as it isness. Ho is the Japanese word for dharma, the teachings or the truth. And A is a robe, nyohoe. So that's where that comes from. And so this has been passed down, and it's all laid out very meticulously. And so my sewing instructor, Caroline Savannah, who's speaking next week, so please come. She learned from Tomoe-san, and then very graciously helped me sew this okesa, and instructed me. And there's all measurements, you measure from the fingertip to the elbow, and then you do these calculations, and then you cut the fabric in a particular way, and you dye it in a particular way, and you need a particular type of fabric. And if you can't get this type, then you get this type, and if you can't get that type, then you get that type. And it's all very precise, and even with the instructions, it's just necessary, I think, to have that teacher. And so in about end of January, early February, Stavana and I started meeting every Sunday for about 4 hours. We would chant and sit together and sew. And then over the weeks, other people would join. Meredith, Myoun, McIntosh helped out a lot. And Drew, Sangha member, a dear friend, Elizabeth, helped out. Matthew and I know Elizabeth. Some family members helped out. So I went down to Florida, where my uncle was living at the time, and brought the okesa. And he sewed some stitches, and my mother and aunt, and many people contributed. And it's been a really beautiful practice, and sharing the teachings, going deeper into the teachings. And as we sew, it's all hand sewn, and it's a single stitch called a kyakushi stitch in Japanese. And it's kind of described as like a back stitch. And this back stitch is said to replicate eko hensho, which is a term for turning the light inward that Dogen Zenji talks about in the Fukansa Zengi. Our practice is to turn the light, take the backward step, turn the light inward and reflect. And so there's all these metaphors here in the robe, and it goes by many different names, which you can read about. I clocked to like 11 names, 11 different names in the Keisakudoku. If you're interested, you can read more up on that. And so we sit and we sew, and every stitch, say, is like planting a seed of rice. And every stitch we chant the three treasures, the three refuges. Namu kie ho, I take refuge in the Dharma. Namu kie so, I take refuge in the Sangha. And Namu kie butsu, take refuge in the Buddha. So it's kind of experienced it as this sowing seeds of peace as we were sowing, returning home to that space within all of us, right? Dogen Zenji really emphasized that everything is Buddha nature, right? Everyone is. And so that's kind of the practice that I've been sitting with. How can I remember that in each moment and see all beings, all of life as Buddha? And so I'll share kind of a story that I've been just sitting with a lot since it happened. And it was about a week after I ordained. So I had just received these robes, and it was a Saturday. So I was getting ready to come here. It was, end of November. We had experienced the frost. And so there were no longer flowers in the garden to offer to the altars. And so I was asked to go to Trader Joe's to get some flowers. And I'm running late. I don't know how to put these robes on. And so I'm at my house and I'm like, should probably put them on a great tree. I can get Teijo's help, but I'm late. And so I'll just put them on at my house and I'll wear them to Trader Joe's and just figure out how to drive and move through the world with these robes on. So that's a whole other thing. And I'm like closing them in my door and, like clicking them in the seatbelt or whatever. It's a great mindfulness practice if you ever want to wear the robes. It's a whole other level of things you need to be aware of, things dragging and floating and trailing. And we have a kimono under this, and there's great pockets. They serve as great pockets. But anyway, so I'm going to Trader Joe's, and I'm not wearing my okesa, this outer layer. I'm wearing my rakusu, this one, but I have the rest of the robes on, the rakusu. And I go up into Trader Joe's and go to the flower section, which is right at the front of our Trader Joe's here on Merriman. And someone working there comes up to me and he's like, hey, like, I recognize your robes. I practiced at a Korean Zen spot in Houston for many years. And, it's this great connection. And I'm also noticing as I go through the store, people are kind of responding to me differently than I am used to. I can be pretty hyper vigilant, out in the world. And especially at Trader Joe's, like I'm like focused because I do not like going to that place. Do not like parking there. Inside feels really chaotic to me. So I always know what I need and I know where it is. And I just go and I'm like, phew. And so people don't really make conversation with me. Typically, they kind of get out of the way. I feel like that's at least my experience. But this time people are like looking at me and like smiling and kind of like checking in. It felt like, saying, hey, which was different than what I'm used to. And then so I'm checking out at the checkout, and the cashier, he also recognizes the robes and he says, hey, like I practiced at Zen Mountain Monastery for 10 years and ordained and all this. And so it was another great moment of connection of these practitioners, right, who are also kind of walking this path in their way. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been wearing the robes. So anyway, and then next stop is the gas station. I gotta get gas. So I'm up on the M mark on Merriman. And the guy at the pump next to me looks at me, kind of looks at me up and down and just like has this great big smile and is like asking me how I'm doing. And so maybe, that's just what he does. But that was a unique experience for me at the gas station. I can't remember the last time before then or since then, it has happened, and I haven't worn my robes out in the world really, where somebody has like stopped to really look at me and smile and strike up a conversation, ask how I'm doing. Um, and so, I mean, a few things have been happening for me around that. I mean, one, there's like, okay, I'm seen in a different way, and like these robes mean something. And so it's kind of that reminder to practice. Um, you know, um, it's the same, I think for me, I've had a similar response to the Dharma name, to Genjo. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm committed to something. I've made these vows. I'm practicing this thing. And so it's a reminder to practice. And sometimes that's all it takes, is to remember for me. I get caught up so easily, or I get hooked by things out in the world, or all the time on the cushion, wherever I am, thought, you know, uh, any sense thing, an emotion. And so it's this reminder to come back. And so that was happening. Um, Also this kind of connection, I got to talk about Great Tree and invite these two people who had recognized these robes to Great Tree and kind of share in that way. And I've also had experiences out there in the world. I try to just be really transparent and honest about what I'm doing with my life. So I've been going to this dog park a lot, and you know, I introduce myself to the dog first, right? The owner later, vice versa. But then start talking to the owners, and what do you do for work, this and that. Oh, I just I practice Buddhism right now. And I've noticed people are really interested in that. And I've met several people who are like, oh, I'd love to come practice. I'd love to come to Zen Center or Great Tree. So anyway, it's been this great opportunity to share and connect. Then kind of sitting with it more, I was noticing a lot of like anger around it too, some frustration, annoyance. Because I was like, well, why all of a sudden am I getting treated this way with respect and care and some humanity? Like I was thinking like nothing has changed, if only they knew what's like really happening, right? Unfortunately, when I received the robes, my mind is still doing the same things it's always done, right? I'm still grappling with all the things, greed and aversion and delusion, ignorance, right? I was kind of hoping it would be this magic switch, and I was like, oh yeah, Teijo passed me the robes, and they went through the incense, and now I'm like free. So I hate to, please, not to discourage anyone from like taking the step if it's on your mind, but just know we still got to do our work. But yeah, I'm like, okay, my robes have changed, my clothing, but that's it, you know? And so yeah, I was like, that doesn't feel good. To kind of um receive, I guess, how whatever people receive when they see me, and decide whether they treat me with however they treat me, with care and respect or dignity or whatever. Um, and then of course, Eko Hensho, taking the backward step, looking back at myself, opening up and awakening to all the ways that I do that, all the ways that I make value judgments based on whatever, what a person looks like, their title, where they are, who they are. And so it was a great kind of, and continues to be a great opportunity and a great learning, and a great practice of coming back and practicing that non-discrimination, practicing experiencing all of life as Buddha, not discriminating, not just deciding, oh, this person is worthy and this person is not, but bowing to everyone and everything, the cold, the heat, the cushion, the chair, everyone at the store. It's yeah, it's kind of at the forefront of my mind because it's important for me, because I slip so easily back into those value judgments, right? So once again, just kind of returning to the practice. I'm going to stop in a few minutes. And of course, I didn't talk about anything I really had planned to talk about, a few things. But the last thing I'll say is, you know, us in the, we recently finished a practice group at Great Tree, and we read Being Upright by Reb Anderson Roshi, which is his book on the precepts. Lorna was a part of that, and David. Something that has really stuck with me, many things, but one of the things in particular this morning and thinking about practice right now in my life, I think it was the chapter on not being possessive, not attaching to anything. And the way he put it, I've heard translations of not attaching to anything, including the dharma, including the teachings, but the way he put it was not attaching to anything, especially the dharma, which I like that kind of key word there. But anyway, he says in that chapter about generosity and fearlessness, and how that's what we're asked to bring to the world and to ourselves and to others. And his note on it is, another form of giving fearlessness is to implicitly or explicitly recognize another person as Buddha, showing them respect and appreciation in such a way as to foster their self-respect and confidence. And that to me kind of sums it all up, you know, and it does something. I know when I'm received that way, it kind of reminds me of my own Buddha nature. And so that has really been sitting with me. And he finishes that paragraph with, finally, literally demonstrating fearlessness for the edification and encouragement of others is giving fearlessness. What is demonstrating fearlessness? It is being upright, willing to be who you are and being that way so completely, fully, joyfully, enthusiastically, kindly, and compassionately that others see and feel it and are inspired and encouraged to be fully themselves as well. You give yourself to yourself, and you give yourself to others, and you give others to themselves. And that's kind of, for me, yeah, it's just really, it's aspirational, right? As is these robes, you know, it's an aspiration, it's a practice. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to just practice, right? And I'm really grateful for you all being here, and our Sangha, and Teijo, and what she's created and brought forth, and all our ancestors who have carried on this tradition, and who can, living and dead, you know, those living ancestors who are here practicing, right? And so now we'll close and open it up. If anybody has any comments or questions about anything, thoughts, please share. I'm happy to share more. I meant to kind of go into more detail about like what it was like for me sewing this robe, and here we are.
Genjo. You know, when you were talking about, and when we studied in that book about attachments, it was really weird. I was playing mahjong on the computer. There's certain colors I like, certain numbers I like, certain shapes on the cubes that I like, and I'm sitting there going, why? They're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it just hit me that my desires made me play the game a different way.
Mm-hmm.
If I tried to disengage from, well, I like the 5, and I like the little one that looks like an R, and I like the, you know, so I really was focusing on dropping the preferences. And then I went to the kitchen, and it was like, okay, drop your preferences and do this, you know. It was really weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see where, meeting people and choosing to judge them for one thing or another, your preferences. It's like, lay them down because you're not seeing what's going on if you keep doing that. So thank you for bringing that up again.
Thank you for sharing. I love how these things that we do just kind of in every day, all of a sudden we're seeing them in a different way, and they're like giving us these deep kind of insights, because there's also that piece too to like complicate it, is like we also need preferences, and we need to be able to be discerning and discriminating in order to live and survive. That's why it's a functional aspect of our human being. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't necessary. So there's that.
I wanted to ask you something. Two things. First, what chapter or what part of Reb Anderson's book did you share from just now?
Great question.
I mean, maybe I guess.
It was towards the end. I believe it was chapter. I had to look it up on the internet because I packed my book away, and I didn't want to go into my boxes and unpack it because I'm lazy. But I'm pretty sure it was the chapter on not possessing.
Okay.
Thing. Yeah, I can't remember the number. Yeah.
And then the line in the Robe chant, wearing the Tathagata's teaching. I mean, what you're wearing is pretty close to you and all. There are lots of metaphorical ways of thinking about that. And I wondered if that line especially speaks to you.
Yeah. It wearing the Tathagata's teachings, that one. Yeah. It does. I mean, particularly because well, now I can't remember the rest of the line.
It's we vow to free all beings.
Free all beings. Yeah, that part. Yes, because it's impossible. Right. And I'm thinking about it like with the 4 vows we take too, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. It's like in the one part we're saying this thing is infinite and impossible and boundless, and then the second we're saying, and I'm gonna do it. And so here it kind of like points me to this right effort and kind of letting go of this mind that says it's impossible, this mind that thinks I know everything, this mind that thinks I know what's going to happen in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1,000 years, and just practice. So it does, just kind of that whole line speaks to me in that way.
Thank you.
I don't remember what I was going to say. First of all, thank you. I know you said that you didn't get time to talk. I appreciate everything that you said. And then 2 things. Like the first thing where you say not attaching to the dharma or not attaching too much to the sangha. That was what I was thinking about when I was sitting. It's so funny. We're talking about what to do when we're sitting, and we're like, should we not think? Should we? But I was totally thinking.
Me too.
Yeah, and how attached I was to the sangha, and like, especially I think growing up and having this be like a space where I could be myself, and I didn't feel that a lot of other places, culturally especially. This is like the spot, so I'm like, oh, this is like somewhere I really find as a haven for myself. And was interesting because you were also talking about like being yourself fully and joyfully and just showing up presently with yourself and loving that presentation and how attachment might come from not doing that all the time. So I wasn't showing up fully myself and didn't feel like I could be myself in other spaces. And that's why this one space I was like grasping onto. So that was a really interesting like connection point for me that came from you speaking. And also with that, I was wondering like how do you balance discernment in how thinking about safety for yourself and like how you show up in other spaces or how you discern in other spaces. You're talking about that balance between discernment and discrimination, I guess you could say, or like too much of like assumption about something. How do you balance that to take care of yourself in spaces that might not reciprocate that? I guess. Because I think that's where that grasping came from, because I didn't feel that reciprocal. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, no, yeah. The whole thing made sense. No, the whole thing made sense, and I resonate a lot with what you're saying. Just feeling so safe here in the space and safe in other dharmic spaces, and when I was sitting today, all I was doing was thinking. I was like, who's gonna record the Zoom? How's the sound gonna work? Like, is everybody gonna get here in time? So anyway, relate to that. And there was something else. Yeah, it's such a big question, right? And I don't have a solid answer, right? It's something that I'm kind of constantly negotiating and navigating. Another thing that came up sitting today was a couple of us, Stephen and BI. We just sat a week-long retreat with a Theravadan teacher. It was very different for me from Zen and Mahayana and here and Sesshin. And so I was sitting here and I was just like, it's so nice to be back with my wall and back here at Great Tree, back here with people I know. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Hmm. For me, yeah, that question of discernment. Yeah, I think I listen, I guess, is a part of it. I try to really stay really close to myself, close to my body, close to what's happening for me. And notice, and ask myself, is this necessary? Because I think what can happen is when we do that in the world for so long, when we have these patterns of, or when we're not safe, right? I won't even say we don't feel safe. There are spaces when we're not safe. It's beyond a feeling, we're not received, or even we're just not received when we bring our whole selves, we're shamed or criticized or whatever it may be. When that happens again and again, it can become a pattern. And so then we're doing it not because the space is not safe, but because it's a pattern for us. It's a pattern in our bodies and minds. And so I think being in constant relationship to that question, and do I need this strategy here? Do I need to be more protective here, or is this a space? Is this just kind of a reflex, or is this a space where I can let that go? And it's always a risk,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you.
I guess I heard you talk about having a constant internal dialogue about how you're being perceived, and that kind of answered one question about that it's still happening when you wear your robes. And I know we've talked a lot about, I guess, attachment is also another word would maybe be connection. And when you're not really being authentic with yourself, that is a form of disconnection with other people. And guess I was wondering, when you do wear the robes, you're really displaying a part of yourself that's become more and more of a prominent identity over the past years. And if you feel more open to connection with others when you're wearing them, or if there's an element of, you know, you're representing something when you're out in public wearing those, and are you as open to people at the gas station talking to you when you're not wearing them, or, you know, in a different part of your identity?
Yeah, right. Is it me that's open or closed, or is it the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think wearing these, I want to represent Great Tree well, because that's the community I care about so deeply, and I want to pay my respects and honor to the lineage and to Sangha and to Teijo. So there's definitely a level up, like, okay, you know, I got to tighten up or loosen up, depending. Depends, right? Be upright. But seriously, yeah, I feel that. And I like what you said about the relationship between attachment and connection. I mean, I also feel very safe in these robes too, you know. And Dogen and the Buddha talked about, like, oh, you know, if you're in these robes, you're good. Like, you're protected. If a dragon tries to eat you, if the Garuda tries to eat you, if you're gonna try to be burned up in the fiery pit, like, it's all right. Like, just wear the robes. You're all right, gonna be all right. I feel that, you know. And it kind of, and it's not to say, and I think the way I interpret it is, like, not to say that I'm not going to be harmed, but I'm going to be harmed and I'm going to be okay. It's okay. Whatever happens, it's okay. And I think that's the practice, and maybe back to that question too, because I feel like, to Anna's question around, the question for me too is like, ooh, like, is this how I want to show up in the world? And do I really want to let whatever's happening dictate how authentic I am? And once again, it's a risk. And there may be spaces where it's like, yeah, I am going to retreat some or protect myself more. And more, I'm kind of like, it is what it is, you know? Yeah, with that practice. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was kind of what came up for me.
You said in your talk you would spoke more about your personal experience. So many robes, so many your robes. Brief thing to share.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. They're my robes, but they're not, right? I don't feel they're mine, you know, although I'm the one wearing them. So many people contributed, and what to say. Well, I think I've never really sewn anything. The first thing I sewed was this rakusu a few years ago, and then the okesa. And it goes back to one way, to the question of, like, what do we do when we're in zazen? Do we think? Do we not think? You know, what Dogen says in the Fukan Zazen is, think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. So that answers your question, right? But one thing Teijo has described of zazen is you're letting go of thinking and allowing the support of all beings to come through, you know, because when we're thinking, we're just kind of spinning our own wheels based on our experiences. And when we let that go, we allow infinite possibilities to emerge, infinite beings to come through. And that was the same with sewing. You know, I was like, I can't sew this. I don't have time. I don't have the skill. But kind of letting all that go and just starting. And then Savannah came through and taught me, and so many other people joined and sewed, you know, or encouraged me. I was working at UNCA at the time, and I would bring it to my office and sew in between when I had time. And people would notice and kind of ask me, and was just always received with such encouragement, you know, and interest and intrigue. And they say even touching the robe guarantees realization of the way. And so I would always be like, oh, you want to come check it out? Yeah, but it was kind of a practice of Zazen, of letting go and allowing the support of all beings to come through in ways that were unexpected. And that's kind of the practice too. That's one anecdote. We got a few more minutes. 3 more to be exact. So what I love about Zen, we was like, boom, we're on it. Yeah. And then, yeah.
I'm curious if you imagine what it's going to be like to wear them like every day in Japan,
Mm.
and whether there's like excitement, whether you're going to be like, oh, I'm tired of this. Like, and then also after that experience in Trader Joe's, like whether that's gonna, like in a country like Japan where the robes are much more recognized, like whether there'll be what that will be like to wear them around.
Yeah, I've thought about it. It's been both. It's been like, oh, it'll be great practice, so I'll become more familiar and comfortable in them. And it's gonna be like, and it's been a lot of like, ooh, it's gonna be annoying to take them on and off, and it's gonna be hot in the summer. Yeah. And ultimately, or what I typically settle on is, yeah, what a great opportunity to practice and to keep showing up, you know. And I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting to be in a culture where more collectively they see it and recognize it. You know, I don't know what that will be like. Yeah.
So maybe you have any anecdotes about non-human beings of any sort in your recent experiences? I heard you say you've been bound to the heat and the cold and many things in between, and I'm just curious.
Mhm. Yeah, like the non-human world.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, I don't know. You know, there's a whole world out there. There's a lot I just don't and can't know and perceive, and yet here we all are. And the fact that we're here living and practicing and breathing, we wouldn't be here without the support of infinite beings, seen and seen, unknown and unknown. I think, you know, and BI and I were talking about this the other day. But I think, you know, what I experienced in Zen too, Japanese Zen, is, and I think the beautiful thing about Buddhism is its malleability. Um, and you know, it found its way to Zen, and the indigenous religion of Japan is Shintoism, and in Shintoism, everything has life. You know, the chair, the cushion, the rock, the mountain, and I feel like that's merged with Zen maybe in a beautiful way, seeing life in everything, and everything is worthy of respect and has a kind of a um, I don't know if I have the right words, but a life that maybe that I can't perceive. You know, even thinking about like different animals, right? Who just can perceive light in different ways and can perceive um or see things that we can't, you know. I have a dog, Kiku, and she's always like, she'll walk into a room and she'll just look up, and then she'll kind of come, and I'm like, what are you, who's up there? You know, what are you seeing? um you know, and then yeah, there's can go into other kind of realms of Buddhism I'm not as familiar with, where they talk about these higher states of consciousness where you can perceive different beings from different realms, you know. That kind of gets to your question. So, yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all for being here again. Please come next week if you're interested in hearing the real the real about the robe, the real, because Caroline, yeah, she's excellent, and loves this practice so much. She loves to sew, and she loves the history and tradition of the robes, and so it's such a great gift to hear her talk about it. So please come next week. So we'll give back the merit, and it's a call and response. May the merit of this practice benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thank you, Genjo.